The charcoal in Clara Whitmore's fingers had turned them nearly black, but she barely noticed as she captured the elegant lines of the sorrel mare drinking from Willow Creek, the afternoon sun of 1876 casting gold across the Montana Territory landscape. Clara had arrived in Silver Ridge 3 weeks ago with her Aunt Margaret, who had inherited a boarding house from a distant cousin. The journey from Boston had been long and dusty, but Clara had filled 2 sketchbooks with drawings of everything she saw along the way. Now, at 22 years old, she was supposed to be helping her aunt run the establishment, but she kept slipping away to draw whenever she could. Art was the only thing that made sense to her, the only language she truly understood in a world that often felt too loud and demanding. The mare was magnificent, all muscle and grace, with a white blaze down her face that Clara had carefully rendered on her paper. She was so absorbed in shading the reflection in the water that she did not hear the footsteps approaching through the tall grass behind her. "That is Thunder," a deep voice said, and Clara jumped so violently that her charcoal went skittering across the page, leaving an ugly black streak through her careful work. She whirled around, her heart hammering, and found herself looking up at the tallest man she had ever seen. He wore dusty leather chaps over worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a black hat tipped back just enough that she could see his face. It was a striking face, all strong lines and sun-bronzed skin, with eyes the color of weathered denim and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily, though it was not smiling now. He was staring at her sketchbook with an expression of pure wonder. "I am so sorry," Clara stammered, trying to shield her ruined drawing from view. "I did not realize this was private property." "I will leave immediately." "Hold on now," the man said, raising one large hand. "I am not asking you to leave, I just wanted to see what you were doing." He took a step closer, and Clara found herself frozen in place, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. "May I?" There was something in his voice, a genuine curiosity mixed with respect, that made Clara slowly turn the sketchbook around so he could see. The man crouched down beside her, balancing easily on the balls of his feet, and studied her drawing with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. "This is remarkable," he said after a long moment. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "You made her look exactly like herself, not just any horse, but Thunder. You captured something about her spirit." Clara felt heat rising in her cheeks. "Thank you, I try to see what makes each subject unique." "Well, you have got an eye for it." He looked up at her then, and Clara felt the full force of his gaze. Up close, she could see that his eyes were not just blue but had flecks of gray in them like storm clouds. "I am Cole Brennan." "That is my horse you have been drawing." "Clara Whitmore," she replied, finding her voice stronger now. "I truly apologize for trespassing. I arrived in Silver Ridge recently, and I am still learning where I am allowed to go." "Willow Creek does not belong to anyone," Cole said, straightening up to his full height, which had to be well over 6 feet. "Everyone uses it. I just happened to bring Thunder down for a drink and saw someone sitting here." He paused, and then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming it completely. "Draw me next." The request was so unexpected that Clara could only stare at him, her mouth slightly open. "What?" "Draw me next," Cole repeated, and now there was a hint of mischief in those storm cloud eyes. "If you can make a horse look that good, I am curious what you would do with a person." Clara felt her face flame scarlet. She could feel the heat spreading from her cheeks down her neck, and she knew she must be turning an absolutely mortifying shade of red. "I do not know if that would be appropriate," she managed to say. "Why not?" Cole asked, tilting his head. "You are an artist, I am just another subject." "Unless," and here his smile widened, "you are worried you might make me look too handsome." Clara let out a surprised laugh despite her embarrassment. "You certainly have confidence, Mr. Brennan." Cole, he corrected. And out here in Montana, confidence is necessary for survival. So what do you say, Clara Whitmore? Will you draw me, or are you afraid of the challenge? There was something irresistible about his playful challenge, something that made Clara want to prove herself even as her heart raced in her chest. Fine, she said, flipping to a fresh page in her sketchbook with more force than necessary. Sit down by that cottonwood tree and try to hold still. Cole's grin was triumphant as he strode over to the massive cottonwood and settled himself against its trunk. One leg stretched out and the other bent, his arm resting casually on his knee. He tipped his hat back a little farther and looked directly at Clara with an expression that was both challenging and amused. Clara took a deep breath and picked up a fresh piece of charcoal. Her fingers were trembling slightly, which annoyed her. She had drawn dozens of people before, hundreds probably, in her classes back in Boston and in her own private studies. But something about Cole, Brennan, made her nervous in a way she could not quite define. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like he could see past her careful walls to something underneath. Maybe it was the sheer physical presence of him, all that contained energy and strength. Or maybe it was simply that he was the most compelling subject she had ever had. She started with the basic shapes, blocking out his form against the tree. Then she began to add details, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, the breadth of his shoulders. As she worked, she forgot to be nervous. This was what she loved about drawing, the way the whole world fell away until there was nothing but the subject and the page and the movement of her hand translating what her eyes saw into something tangible. Cole stayed remarkably still, watching her with those steady eyes. Thunder had wandered over and was cropping grass nearby, her reins trailing on the ground. The afternoon sun slanted lower, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Clara worked quickly, losing herself in the familiar rhythm of creation. You are very serious when you work, Cole observed after a while, and Clara realized with a start that nearly half an hour had passed. I suppose I am, she admitted, glancing up at him. Art is the most serious thing in my life. What brought you to Silver Ridge? Cole asked. We do not get many artists passing through. My aunt inherited a boarding house here, Clara explained, her hand still moving across the page. She needed help running it, and I needed a change of scenery. Boston was becoming suffocating. How so? Clara hesitated, then decided there was something about Cole that invited honesty. I was expected to marry a man chosen by my family, a banker, very respectable, very boring. He thought my art was a charming hobby that I would give up once we were wed and I had proper responsibilities. She made a sharp line for emphasis. I chose Montana instead. Cole let out a low whistle. That took courage. Or foolishness, Clara said with a wry smile. My mother has not forgiven me. But I could not imagine spending my life with someone who did not understand the most important part of me. Art, you mean? Yes. Clara looked up at him fully now, her charcoal poised above the page. Do you have something like that, something that defines who you are? Cole was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to Thunder. Horses, he said finally. I have been working with them since I was 8 years old. My father had a small ranch, taught me everything about breeding and training. When he died 5 years ago, I took over. Now I have got about 200 acres and 30 horses, and I am building a reputation for breeding some of the finest mounts in Montana territory. There was pride in his voice, but also something deeper, a connection to the land and his work that Clara recognized because she felt the same way about her art. That is wonderful, she said softly. It is hard work, Cole said. But I cannot imagine doing anything else. Every horse has a personality just like Thunder. Getting to know them, earning their trust, helping them become the best versions of themselves, it means everything to me. Then we are alike in that way, Clara said. We both found the thing that makes us who we are." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition and understanding that made Clara's breath catch. She looked back down at her sketchbook quickly, adding the final details to her drawing. When she was finished, she studied it critically. It was good work, maybe some of her best. She had captured not just Cole's physical appearance but something of his character, the confidence and warmth and strength that radiated from him. "Can I see?" Cole asked, rising from his position and stretching. Clara heard several joints pop, and she felt a pang of guilt for making him sit still for so long. She turned the sketchbook around reluctantly, always nervous about showing her work. Cole took it from her hands gently and studied the drawing in silence. Clara watched his face, trying to read his reaction. His expression was unreadable at first, but then she saw something soften in his eyes. "This is how you see me?" he asked quietly. "That is what I saw," Clara corrected. "The angle of light, the composition, the moment—" "No," Cole interrupted, still looking at the drawing. "This is more than technical skill. You drew me like I am someone worth knowing." He looked up at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch again. "Thank you." Clara did not know what to say to that. She was saved from having to respond by the sound of hoofbeats approaching fast. Both she and Cole turned to see a young man on a gray gelding galloping toward them, dust rising in a cloud behind him. "Cole!" the rider shouted as he pulled up hard, the gelding dancing sideways. "We have got trouble at the ranch. That new stallion you bought last week just crashed through the paddock fence and took off toward the high country," Cole swore under his breath. "When?" "About 30 minutes ago. I have been looking for you all over." Cole was already moving toward Thunder, gathering her reins in one smooth motion. He swung up into the saddle with an ease that spoke of a lifetime spent on horseback. "I have to go," he said to Clara, and there was genuine regret in his voice. "That stallion cost me nearly every dollar I had saved. If I lose him—" "Go," Clara said firmly. "I understand." Cole hesitated, Thunder prancing beneath him, eager to run. "Will you be here tomorrow, same time?" Clara felt her heart skip. "I could be." "Then I will find you," Cole promised. He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that was somehow both casual and courtly, then wheeled Thunder around and took off at a gallop, the other rider close behind. Clara stood watching until they disappeared over a rise, dust still hanging in the air where they had been. Then she looked down at her sketchbook, at the drawing of Cole Brennan, and felt a smile tugging at her lips despite herself. She carefully tore the page free, rolled it up gently, and tucked it into the leather satchel she carried with her art supplies. Tomorrow, she thought. She would be here tomorrow. The walk back to town took Clara about 20 minutes, and she spent the entire time replaying the encounter in her mind. By the time she reached the boarding house, a 2-story structure with a wide front porch and freshly painted white siding, she was thoroughly distracted. Her Aunt Margaret was sweeping the porch steps, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, her practical brown dress covered with a crisp white apron. "There you are," Margaret said, not unkindly. "I was beginning to wonder if you had gotten lost. We have guests arriving for supper in an hour, and I need your help in the kitchen." "Of course, Aunt Margaret," Clara said, hurrying up the steps. "I am sorry, I lost track of time." Margaret's sharp eyes took in Clara's flushed face and the smudge of charcoal on her cheek. "You were drawing again." "Yes, ma'am." "Well, wash up and come help me with the biscuits. And Clara," Margaret's stern expression softened slightly, "I am glad you are finding happiness here. Lord knows you were miserable in Boston those last few months." Clara felt a rush of affection for her aunt. Margaret was strict and practical, but she had taken Clara in without hesitation when Clara had written explaining her situation. "Thank you for giving me a home." "You are family," Margaret said simply. "Now go wash that charcoal off before you get it all over my clean linens." The evening passed in a blur of cooking and serving and cleaning. The boarding house was home to 6 permanent residents, all men who worked in Silver Ridge's silver mines or at the lumber mill on the edge of town. They were rough but respectful, and they ate Margaret's cooking with the appreciation of men who had known far worse fare. Clara helped serve the meal, her thoughts drifting repeatedly to a certain tall cowboy with storm-cloud eyes. That night, alone in her small room on the 2nd floor, Clara lit a candle and carefully unrolled the drawing of Cole. She studied it in the flickering light, seeing again the way his mouth curved with humor, the steadiness of his gaze, the suggestion of strength in the set of his shoulders. She had drawn him truthfully without artifice or flattery, and yet the result was undeniably compelling. "Do not be foolish," she told herself sternly. He was just being friendly. Montana hospitality, that is all. But she thought about the way he had looked at her work with such genuine appreciation, the way he had asked her to draw him, the way he had said he would find her tomorrow. And despite her best efforts to be practical, Clara fell asleep with a smile on her face. The next afternoon, Clara finished her chores as quickly as possible and set out for Willow Creek with her sketchbook and supplies. The day was warm, the sky a brilliant blue unmarked by clouds, and wildflowers dotted the grass in splashes of yellow and purple. She told herself she was going to draw the landscape, maybe some of the interesting rock formations she had seen farther up the creek, but she knew she was lying. When she reached the cottonwood tree where Cole had posed yesterday, she spread out her skirt and sat down, opening her sketchbook to a fresh page. Then she waited, trying to look absorbed in selecting the right charcoal while her ears strained for the sound of approaching hoofbeats. An hour passed, then another. The sun tracked slowly across the sky, and Clara's initial excitement began to fade into embarrassment. Of course, he was not coming. He had a runaway stallion to find, a ranch to run, 100 responsibilities more important than meeting some girl by a creek. She had been foolish to think he had meant it. She was just gathering her supplies to leave when she heard Thunder's distinctive whinny. Clara looked up to see Cole riding toward her at an easy lope, and her heart leaped in a way that she told herself was absolutely ridiculous. "You came," Cole said as he dismounted, and there was relief in his voice that made Clara feel less foolish. "I said I would," Clara replied, trying to sound casual. "Did you find your stallion?" Cole's face broke into a grin. "Found him at dawn this morning, about 5 miles up in the high country." He was standing in a meadow surrounded by a bunch of wild mares, looking like the king of creation. Took me 3 hours to convince him to come home. Is he all right? Not a scratch on him, thank God, though my pride took a beating. Turns out the fence was not as sturdy as I thought. Cole tied Thunder's reins loosely to a low branch and came to sit beside Clara on the grass. He was closer than he had been yesterday, close enough that Clara could smell the scent of leather and horses and something else, maybe sage or pine. "I was worried you would not be here." "Why would you think that?" "Because I had to leave so suddenly yesterday. I thought maybe you would think I was rude." "I thought you had a responsibility to handle," Clara said. "That is not rude." "That is being an adult," Cole laughed, a rich warm sound. "Not everyone sees it that way, my last." He stopped abruptly and Clara saw a shadow cross his face. "Your last what?" she prompted gently. "My last intended," Cole said after a moment. "Sarah Hartley. We were engaged for about 6 months. She could not understand why I had to work such long hours, why I could not always drop everything to attend social events in town. She said I loved my horses more than I loved her. Did you?" Cole looked at Clara with surprise, then a reluctant smile. "Yes, I suppose I did. Is that terrible?" "It is honest," Clara said. "Better than marrying her and both of you being miserable." "That is what would have happened to me in Boston. My intended, Charles, he thought my art was silly." a phase I would outgrow. He planned out our whole life, and none of it included me having time to draw. Then he was a fool, Cole said firmly. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching thunder crop grass by the creek. Then Cole said, "Will you teach me?" "Teach you what?" "To draw." Cole looked almost embarrassed. "I have always wanted to learn, but I never had the chance. My father thought it was frivolous, and then after he died, I was too busy keeping the ranch going." Clara felt a strange warmth spreading through her chest. "I would be happy to teach you, though I should warn you it takes practice and patience." "I have both," Cole assured her. He hesitated, then added, "I brought something for you." He reached into the saddlebag hanging from Thunder's saddle and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. When Clara unwrapped it, she found 3 sticks of drawing charcoal, clearly expensive, and a set of colored pencils in shades she had never seen before. "The general store in Silver Ridge does not carry much in the way of art supplies," Cole said, watching her face anxiously. "But I rode into Helena yesterday evening after we found the stallion, and there was a shop there that had these. The owner said they were imported from France. I hope they are the right kind." Clara stared at the supplies, her throat suddenly tight. No one had ever bought her art supplies as a gift before. Her family had tolerated her hobby but never encouraged it. Charles had suggested she might take up needlework instead, something more useful. But Cole, who had known her for one afternoon, had ridden to Helena, over 20 miles away, just to buy her charcoal and colored pencils. "Clara," Cole asked, and there was worry in his voice now. "If they are wrong, I can take them back." "They are perfect," Clara managed to say. "No one has ever—" She stopped, not trusting her voice. "No one has ever what?" Clara looked up at him, her eyes suspiciously bright. "No one has ever given me something that showed they understood what matters to me. Thank you, Cole. This is the kindest gift I have ever received." Something shifted in Cole's expression, softening and intensifying at the same time. "Then the people in your life before were fools," he said quietly. "All of them." They spent the rest of the afternoon by Willow Creek, Clara giving Cole his first drawing lesson. She started with basic shapes, showing him how to see objects as collections of circles and squares and triangles. Cole was terrible at first, his big hands clumsy with the delicate charcoal, his lines heavy and uneven. But he listened carefully to every word Clara said, and he kept trying even when his attempts were laughably bad. "I am hopeless," he said after his 5th attempt to draw thunder resulted in something that looked more like a misshapen dog. "You are learning," Clara corrected. "No one is good at first. I have sketchbooks from when I was 8 years old that would make you feel much better about your abilities. Can I see them?" "Absolutely not," Clara said with a laugh. "Some things are too embarrassing to share." As the afternoon wore on, Cole did start to improve, his lines becoming more confident, his proportions slightly better. More importantly, Clara could see that he was genuinely enjoying himself, the concentration on his face mixed with pleasure. When the sun began to sink toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Cole had produced a recognizable if crude sketch of thunder. "I did it," he said, holding up the page with evident pride. "You did," Clara agreed warmly. "That is a solid first effort. Will you come back tomorrow?" Cole asked. "I want to learn more." Clara knew she should not. She had responsibilities at the boarding house, and she barely knew this man, and spending so much time alone with him was probably scandalous by any standard. But when she looked at Cole's hopeful face, all her practical objections evaporated. "Yes," she said simply. Over the next 2 weeks, Clara and Cole met by Willow Creek nearly every afternoon. Clara continued to teach Cole the basics of drawing, and in return, Cole told her about horses, about the land, about the life he had built here in Montana Territory. Clara learned that Cole was 26 years old, that his mother had died giving birth to a sister who had also not survived, that his father had been a hard man who loved deeply but struggled to show it. She learned that Cole had fought off 2 mountain lions to protect his horses, that he could break a wild Mustang without breaking its spirit, that he had a scar on his left shoulder from a fall when he was 14. Cole learned that Clara had 3 brothers, all older, all successful in business, and deeply uninterested in their sister's artistic ambitions. He learned that her mother had been a cold woman who valued propriety above all else, but that her father had secretly loved Clara's drawings and kept one of her early sketches of him in his desk drawer. He learned that Clara had once sold a painting to a gallery in Boston under a man's name because women artists were not taken seriously, and that the money from that sale had helped pay for her journey to Montana. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from philosophy to silly jokes that left them both laughing. Cole brought Clara wildflowers and interesting rocks. Clara drew Cole's hands, his profile, thunder in a dozen different poses. They did not touch beyond the occasional accidental brush of fingers, but Clara felt closer to Cole than she had ever felt to anyone. On the 15th day of their meetings, Cole arrived at Willow Creek looking troubled. Clara noticed immediately the way his shoulders were tense, the way his usual easy smile was missing. "What is wrong?" she asked as soon as he dismounted. Cole did not answer right away. Instead, he tied up Thunder and came to sit beside Clara in their usual spot under the cottonwood. "I need to tell you something," he said finally, "and I am afraid of how you will react." Clara felt her stomach clench with anxiety. "Tell me." "I am falling in love with you," Cole said, his voice low and intense. "No, that is not right. I have already fallen. I am in love with you, Clara Whitmore. I have been since the day I found you drawing Thunder, maybe since the moment you blushed when I asked you to draw me next." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Cole must be able to hear it. "Cole, let me finish," he said urgently. "I know we have only known each other for 2 weeks. I know you came to Montana to escape expectations and pressure. I know I probably have no right to say any of this, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. Every afternoon with you is the best part of my day. Every night, I go to sleep thinking about something you said or the way you laugh or the way you look at the world like it is something precious worth capturing. And I wake up counting the hours until I can see you again." He took a shaky breath, and Clara saw that his hands were trembling. "I am not asking you to feel the same way. I just need you to know that this is real for me. You are real for me in a way that nothing else has ever been." Clara found that her own hands were shaking as she reached out to take one of Cole's in both of hers. His skin was warm and calloused, his palm broad and strong. "You foolish man," she said, and her voice was unsteady. "Did you really think you were the only one falling?" Cole's eyes went wide. "Clara." "I love you," Clara said, and saying the words felt like stepping off a cliff into open air, terrifying and exhilarating at once. "I think I started loving you when you looked at my drawing like it was something precious. Or maybe when you rode to Helena to buy me charcoal. Or maybe when you tried so hard to learn to draw even though you were terrible at it. I do not know exactly when it happened, only that it did." "You love me," Cole repeated, like he needed to hear it again to believe it. "I love you," Clara confirmed, and then Cole was cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones with heartbreaking gentleness. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes," Clara whispered, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss started gentle, almost hesitant, but it quickly deepened as Clara wound her arms around Cole's neck and he pulled her closer. He kissed like he did everything else, with complete focus and intensity, like Clara was the only thing in the world that mattered. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. Clara pulled back to look at him, startled. "What?" "Marry me," Cole repeated. "I know it is fast. I know you might want more time. But I am sure, Clara, I have never been more sure of anything. You are everything I did not know I was looking for." "Cole, we have known each other for 2 weeks. I do not care if it has been 2 days or 2 years," Cole said fiercely. "I know what I feel, but if you need time, I will wait." "I will wait as long as you need." Clara looked at this man who had changed her life so completely in such a short time. She thought about how her mother would faint with horror at the impropriety of it all. She thought about how Charles would have called it reckless and irresponsible. But Clara had not come to Montana to live her life according to other people's rules. "Yes," she said, and watched joy transform Cole's face. "Yes, I will marry you." Cole let out a whoop of happiness that startled thunder, then picked Clara up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. "I am going to make you so happy," he promised when they broke apart. "I swear it, Clara. I am going to spend every day of my life making sure you never regret this." "I already know I will not," Clara said, and she meant it with her whole heart. They stayed by Willow Creek until sunset, making plans and dreaming about their future. Cole described his ranch, the house his father had built with its wide porch and big windows that would give Clara perfect light for drawing. He talked about expanding it, adding a room that could be Clara's studio. Clara talked about drawing all of Cole's horses, creating a record of the bloodlines he was building. They talked about children, maybe 2 or 3, and teaching them to love the land and art and horses. When the light finally failed, and Cole insisted on riding Clara back to town so she would not have to walk in the dark, they were both glowing with happiness. Cole left Clara at the corner near the boarding house with one final lingering kiss and a promise to speak to Margaret the next day to ask for her blessing. Clara floated into the boarding house to find her aunt waiting in the parlor, a knowing look on her face. "You have been spending a great deal of time at that creek," Margaret observed. "I have been drawing," Clara said, unable to keep the smile off her face. "And meeting with Cole Brennan," Margaret added. "Do not look so surprised. This is a small town, Clara. People talk." Clara felt a flicker of worry. "Are you angry?" Margaret studied her niece for a long moment, then sighed. "I am not angry. Cole Brennan is a good man, one of the best in Silver Ridge. He works hard, he is honest, and he treats people fairly. If he has intentions toward you, he could do far worse, and so could you." "He has asked me to marry him," Clara blurted out, and I said yes. Margaret did not look surprised. "How long have you known him?" 2 weeks, Clara admitted. "That is very fast." "I know, but Aunt Margaret, he understands me. He sees me for who I really am, and he loves that person. He bought me art supplies from Helena. He is learning to draw because it matters to me. He makes me feel like I am exactly the right person to be, not someone who needs to change or compromise or shrink herself down." Margaret's stern expression softened. "Then he is a much better man than Charles Preston ever was. That pompous fool wanted you to stop being yourself entirely." She stood and came to take Clara's hands. "You have my blessing, child. But the wedding will be done properly, with at least a month of engagement so people do not talk more than they already will." Clara threw her arms around her aunt. Thank you so much." "Just be happy," Margaret said, patting Clara's back awkwardly. She was not a demonstrative woman, but Clara could hear the affection in her voice. "That is all I want for you." The next day, Cole arrived at the boarding house in his best clothes, his hair still damp from washing, to formally ask for Clara's hand. Margaret made him sit in the parlor and subjected him to 20 minutes of questions about his finances, his property, and his intentions. Cole answered every question honestly and respectfully, never losing his patience or his good humor. By the end of the interrogation, even Margaret was smiling. "You have my permission to marry my niece," she said finally, "but I expect you to take good care of her, Cole Brennan." "I intend to spend my life doing exactly that, ma'am," Cole promised. The engagement was announced the following Sunday at church, and Silver Ridge buzzed with the news. Most people seemed genuinely happy for the couple. A few older ladies clucked about the speed of the courtship, but even they had to admit that Clara and Cole seemed well matched. Clara was introduced to Cole's friends, other ranchers and cowboys who treated her with friendly curiosity. She met Thomas Garrett, who owned the property adjacent to Cole's, and James Sullivan, who worked at the livery stable in town and had known Cole since they were boys. Clara also met Emma Chen, whose family ran the general store and who quickly became a friend. Emma was 20 years old, sharp-witted and practical, and she had opinions about everything. "I am glad Cole found you," Emma told Clara one afternoon when Clara stopped by the store. "After Sarah Hartley, I was worried he might give up on finding someone who understood him." "What was she like?" Clara asked, curious despite herself. Emma made a face. "Vain and shallow." She wanted Cole because he was handsome and owned property, but she never cared about who he actually was. She used to complain constantly about how much time he spent with his horses, like she expected him to neglect his livelihood to escort her to dances. She paused, then added more gently, "You are different. I can see it in the way you look at him. You love him for who he is, not what he has." "I would love him if he had nothing," Clara said simply, and Emma smiled. The month of engagement passed in a blur of preparation. Margaret took charge of organizing the wedding with military precision, enlisting the help of several other women in town. Clara was measured for a wedding dress by Mrs. Anderson, the seamstress, who created a beautiful gown of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Clara spent her afternoons with Cole, sometimes at Willow Creek, sometimes at his ranch where he showed her the horses and introduced her to the two men who worked for him, Miguel and his son Carlos, who had come up from Texas and were some of the finest horse handlers Cole had ever seen. The ranch house was smaller than Clara had imagined, but well built and sturdy, with the wide porch Cole had promised and windows that let in floods of natural light. Cole showed her the room he wanted to convert into her studio, currently full of tack and supplies but with good bones and a window facing north that would provide perfect, consistent light. "We can clear it out this summer," Cole said, standing in the doorway with his arm around Clara's waist. "Build you proper shelves for supplies, get you a good work table, whatever you need." "It is perfect," Clara said, leaning into him. "All of this is perfect." They were married on a Saturday in late June in the small church at the center of Silver Ridge. Clara walked down the aisle on her aunt's arm, her sketchbook tucked into the small bag she carried, and Cole waited at the altar looking like he could not quite believe his good fortune. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, the reverend keeping his remarks brief. When Cole kissed his bride, the congregation erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration afterward was held at the boarding house, with Margaret providing a feast that had the entire town talking. There was roasted beef and potatoes, fresh bread and butter, 3 kinds of pie, and a wedding cake that Emma had helped bake. Music was provided by a fiddle player named Jack Harding and his guitar-playing brother, and soon people were dancing in the street outside. Cole danced with Clara for the first dance, holding her close and whispering in her ear that she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They danced 3 more times, and then Clara danced with some of Cole's friends while Cole danced with Margaret, who actually smiled, and with Emma, who teased him mercilessly about being a married man now. As the sun set and the celebration showed no signs of slowing, Cole caught Clara's hand and pulled her aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Brennan?" he asked, and Clara loved the sound of her new name. "Yes," she said, and they slipped away while everyone was distracted by the music. Cole had borrowed a small wagon, and Thunder was tied to the back, following along as they drove out to the ranch under a sky full of stars. Clara sat pressed against Cole's side, his arm around her shoulders, feeling more content than she had ever felt in her life. The ranch house was dark when they arrived, but Cole had left lamps ready to light. He helped Clara down from the wagon and then, to her surprise, swept her up in his arms. "Tradition," he explained with a grin, carrying her over the threshold. "I am not taking any chances on bad luck." He set her down gently in the main room, and Clara looked around with new eyes. This was her home now. Their home. The furniture was simple but well made, the floors were clean, and everything spoke of care and attention. On the mantel above the fireplace, Clara saw her drawing of Thunder, carefully framed. "Cole," she said softly, touched beyond words. "It is the first piece in what is going to be a house full of your art," Cole said, coming to stand behind her and wrap his arms around her waist. "I want your drawings everywhere, Clara. I want to be surrounded by the way you see the world." Clara turned in his arms and kissed him, trying to pour everything she felt into it. Cole responded immediately, his hands coming up to cradle her face, and the kiss deepened until Clara felt dizzy with it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole looked at her with a question in his eyes. "Yes," Clara whispered, understanding without words, and Cole took her hand and led her to the bedroom. Their wedding night was tender and nervous and perfect in its imperfection. Cole was gentle and patient, and Clara loved him even more for the care he took with her. They learned each other slowly, with whispered words and soft touches, and when Clara finally fell asleep in Cole's arms, she felt like she had found the place she was always meant to be. The first weeks of marriage were an adjustment, but a happy one. Clara woke before dawn to help Cole with morning chores, learning how to feed the horses and muck out stalls. Her hands, used to charcoal and paintbrushes, grew calloused from handling hay and leather. Cole was patient with her inexperience, showing her how to curry Thunder, how to check hooves for stones, how to read the body language that indicated a horse was uncomfortable or frightened. In the afternoons, Clara worked on setting up her studio while Cole trained horses. She scrubbed the room clean, painted the walls a soft cream color, and organized her supplies on the shelves Cole built for her. Margaret donated an old table that Clara covered with canvas to protect it from charcoal and paint. Emma contributed a comfortable chair she no longer needed. Thomas Garrett's wife, Ruth, gave Clara an easel that had belonged to her sister. Clara spent hours in that room, drawing everything she saw. She sketched the ranch, the horses, the mountains in the distance. She drew Miguel and Carlos working with a young colt, their movements patient and practiced. She drew Cole breaking a wild-eyed Mustang, the tension and trust between man and animal captured in careful lines. She drew Thunder at rest, at play, drinking from the trough, looking out over the pasture. In the evenings, Clara and Cole cooked dinner together, ate at the small table by the window, and talked about their days. Cole was teaching Clara about horses, explaining bloodlines and conformation, what made a good working horse versus a good riding horse. Clara taught Cole more about drawing, and his skills were improving slowly but steadily. Once a week, they rode into town for supplies and to have dinner with Margaret, who had grown genuinely fond of Cole. Clara had never been happier. She woke up every morning beside the man she loved, spent her days doing work that mattered to her, and fell asleep every night secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. The only shadow on her happiness was a letter that arrived 3 months after the wedding. It was from her mother, the first communication Clara had received from her family since leaving Boston. Clara opened it with trembling hands, Cole standing beside her in silent support. The letter was brief and cold, informing Clara that she had disgraced the family by running off to Montana and marrying some cowboy like a common adventuress. Her mother wrote that Clara was no longer welcome in Boston, that her name was not to be mentioned, and that she should not expect any inheritance or financial support in the future. Clara read it twice, then carefully folded it and set it aside. She was surprised to find that the words hurt less than she expected. "I suppose that is that," she said quietly. "I am sorry," Cole said, taking her hand. "I know they are your family." "You are my family now," Clara said, and meant it. "My mother made her choice and I made mine. I do not regret mine." Cole pulled her into his arms and held her close, and Clara let herself be comforted. Later, she would crumple the letter and throw it into the fire, watching it burn until nothing remained but ash. She would write to her father, hoping he might read it even if he could not respond, telling him about her new life and how happy she was. But she would not let her mother's bitterness poison the joy she had found. That winter was hard, the Montana cold more brutal than anything Clara had experienced in Boston. The wind howled down from the mountains, bringing snow that piled in drifts taller than a man. Cole and his workers spent long hours making sure the horses were sheltered and fed, breaking ice on water troughs, checking for signs of illness or injury. Clara helped where she could, learning to navigate the cold, but she also spent hours in her studio drawing by lamplight when the days grew short. She started a project that winter, a series of drawings documenting every horse on the ranch. Cole was thrilled with the idea, seeing immediately how valuable it would be to have a visual record of his breeding stock. Clara worked methodically, spending time with each horse to capture not just their physical appearance but their personality. She drew Thunder's intelligence and loyalty, the new stallion's wild pride, the gentle mare Rosie's maternal devotion to her foal. When spring finally came, Clara had completed over 30 detailed drawings. Cole had them bound into a book by a craftsman in Helena, and he showed them to everyone who visited the ranch. Word spread, and soon Clara was receiving requests from other ranchers who wanted similar records of their own stock. It was not quite the fine art career Clara had once imagined, but it was deeply satisfying work, and it paid well enough that Clara could contribute financially to the household. In May, Clara realized she had missed her monthly courses twice. She told Cole over breakfast on a Sunday morning, watching nervously for his reaction. Cole stared at her for a long moment, then let out a whoop of joy that sent the cats fleeing from the kitchen. He picked Clara up and spun her around, kissing her thoroughly before setting her back down. "We are having a baby," he kept saying, like he could not quite believe it. "Clara, we are having a baby." "We are," Clara confirmed, laughing at his excitement. "Are you happy?" "Happy," Cole shook his head, his eyes bright. "I am over the moon." "I am, Clara. You have made me the luckiest man in Montana territory." The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Clara tired more quickly and had to limit her time working with the horses. She spent more hours in her studio, working on a new project, a series of drawings of the Montana landscape through the seasons. She was determined to finish it before the baby arrived, wanting to prove to herself that she could still be an artist even as she became a mother. Cole was attentive and anxious, constantly worrying about Clara overdoing it. He brought her breakfast in bed, insisted she rest in the afternoons, and read to her in the evenings from books borrowed from the small lending library in town. Margaret visited frequently, bringing supplies and advice, her stern manner hiding genuine excitement about becoming a great aunt. In January of 1878, during a snowstorm that blanketed the ranch in white, Clara went into labor. Margaret had come to stay a week earlier, anticipating the birth, and she took charge immediately, sending Cole for the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Brennan, no relation, who had delivered half the babies in Silver Ridge. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Cole paced the main room, driving Margaret to distraction with his worry. When the baby's first cry finally rang out, Cole nearly broke down the bedroom door in his haste to get to Clara. "A boy," Mrs. Brennan announced, placing the tiny red-faced bundle in Clara's arms. "A healthy boy." Cole sat carefully on the edge of the bed, staring at his son with awe. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that might turn blue like Cole's or brown like Clara's. Impossible to tell yet. He had tiny perfect fingers that wrapped around Cole's thumb when it was offered, and a rosebud mouth that opened in a yawn. "He is beautiful," Cole whispered. "Clara, he is perfect." "Samuel," Clara said, the name they had chosen weeks ago. "Samuel Cole Brennan." "Hello, Samuel," Cole said softly to his son. "Welcome to the world. I promise we are going to take such good care of you." Motherhood transformed Clara's life in ways she had not anticipated. Samuel was a good baby, healthy and curious, but he demanded constant attention. Clara's hours in the studio dwindled as she learned to feed and change and soothe her son. There were moments when she felt frustrated, trapped by the endless needs of an infant, but those moments were balanced by unexpected joy. Samuel's first smile, the way he reached for her when she entered a room, the sound of his laughter when Cole played with him. Cole was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with Samuel. He sang to his son while working in the barn, carried him in a sling while checking the horses, showed him off to anyone who visited. When Samuel was 4 months old, Cole placed him on Thunder's back for the first time, holding the baby carefully as the gentle mare stood perfectly still. Clara captured the moment in a drawing that would become one of her favorites. As Samuel grew, Clara gradually found her rhythm, learning to balance motherhood with her art. She drew in the early mornings before Samuel woke and during his afternoon naps. She drew quickly, efficiently, making the most of the limited time. And she found new inspiration in her son, filling sketchbooks with drawings of Samuel sleeping, playing, reaching for sunbeams. The ranch continued to prosper. Cole's reputation as a horse breeder grew, and buyers came from as far as Wyoming and the Dakota Territory to purchase his stock. He hired 2 more workers, brothers named Patrick and Sean O'Neill, who had emigrated from Ireland, and expanded the barn to accommodate more horses. The money was good, and Cole put most of it back into the ranch, buying better breeding stock, improving the facilities, purchasing the adjacent property when Thomas Garrett decided to sell and move to California. Clara's work also flourished. She was now regularly commissioned to draw horses, cattle, and even portraits of people's families. Her drawings were detailed and lifelike, capturing something essential about her subjects that photographs could not match. She charged fair prices and saved most of what she earned, wanting to contribute to Samuel's future education. When Samuel was 2 years old, Clara realized she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder, Clara more tired and more prone to morning sickness. Samuel was at an age where he demanded constant vigilance, running everywhere and climbing everything, and Clara felt stretched thin trying to keep up with him while growing another baby. Cole hired a young woman named Annie from town to help with Samuel and the housework, giving Clara more time to rest. Annie was 18, cheerful and patient, and Samuel adored her. With Annie's help, Clara made it through the difficult months and delivered a healthy daughter in October of 1880. They named her Margaret Rose, after Clara's aunt, and the delicate wild roses that grew by Willow Creek. Rose, as they called her, was a quieter baby than Samuel had been, content to watch the world with solemn dark eyes. She had Clara's brown hair and Cole's strong features, and she rarely cried unless genuinely distressed. Samuel was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to hold her and show her his toys. Cole was equally enchanted, marveling at how different Rose was from Samuel. "We made a whole person," he kept saying, staring at his daughter with wonder. "Again, how is that possible?" With 2 children, the house felt smaller, and Cole began planning an expansion. Over the next year, he added 2 bedrooms and a larger studio for Clara, with windows on 2 walls and space for all her supplies and a desk for correspondence with clients. The new studio was Clara's sanctuary, and though she still had less time than she wanted for her art, what time she did have was spent in a space designed specifically for her needs. The children grew, and life settled into a new normal. Samuel started learning to ride at 4, sitting in front of Cole on Thunder's successor, a bay gelding named Ranger. Rose was quieter and more contemplative, preferring to sit with Clara and watch her draw. Clara gave Rose her own sketchbook and charcoal when she was 3, and was delighted to find that her daughter had inherited her artistic inclination. Clara's relationship with Cole deepened with time. The passionate intensity of their early courtship had matured into something steadier but no less powerful. They knew each other completely now, the good and the difficult. They had weathered sleepless nights with sick children, arguments about money and priorities, the stresses of running a ranch and raising a family. Through it all, they had chosen each other again and again, finding their way back to partnership and love. They still met by Willow Creek sometimes, when they could arrange for Annie to watch the children. They would sit under the cottonwood tree, and Clara would draw while Cole worked on his own sketches. His skills had improved dramatically over the years, and while he would never be as talented as Clara, he could now produce recognizable and even pleasing drawings of horses and landscapes. These afternoons were precious, a chance to remember who they had been before children and responsibilities, to reconnect as the couple who had fallen in love over a drawing of a horse. In 1883, Montana Territory began to change rapidly. The Northern Pacific Railway completed its line across the territory, bringing more settlers and more commerce. Silver Ridge grew from a small frontier town into a bustling community with a proper school, a newspaper, several churches, and even a small hotel. The wild lawlessness of earlier years faded as civilization took firmer root. Clara watched these changes with mixed feelings. She appreciated the school for Samuel and Rose, the easier access to supplies and information, the sense of stability and progress. But she also mourned the loss of the wilder Montana she had fallen in love with, the sense of endless possibility and open spaces. Cole felt similarly, worried about what growth would mean for ranching, whether there would still be enough open range for his horses. But they adapted as they always had. Cole began fencing his property, a concession to the changing times. Clara joined the school board and fought to include art instruction in the curriculum, finally convincing the other members by offering to teach the classes herself once a week. Samuel thrived in school, bright and social, making friends easily. Rose was more reserved but loved learning, especially reading and drawing. In 1885, Clara received a letter that changed everything. It was from a gallery in San Francisco, written by a dealer named Harrison Webb, who had seen Clara's work through a client who had commissioned horse drawings. Webb wrote that he was impressed by the quality and character of Clara's work, and he wanted to include several of her pieces in a show he was organizing featuring Western artists. Clara read the letter 3 times, not quite believing it. A gallery show in San Francisco was everything she had once dreamed about in Boston, the validation she had thought she would never receive. Cole found her sitting at the kitchen table, the letter still in her hands, tears streaming down her face. "Clara, what is wrong?" He was at her side immediately, his hands on her shoulders. "Nothing is wrong," Clara managed to say. "Cole, a gallery in San Francisco wants to show my work, An actual gallery with actual art buyers. He wants drawings of Montana landscapes and horses. He says my work captures something unique about the West. Cole let out a shout of triumph and pulled Clara to her feet, spinning her around. That is incredible. I always knew your talent would be recognized. I never thought. Clara stopped, overwhelmed. I gave up on this dream, Cole. I thought I was just a ranch wife who drew horses for extra money. You are an artist, Cole said firmly. You have always been an artist. Now the world gets to see what I have known all along. Clara spent the next month preparing pieces for the show, selecting her best work and creating several new drawings specifically for the exhibition. She sent 20 drawings to San Francisco, carefully packed and insured, and then she waited anxiously for news. The show opened in October, and 2 weeks later, Clara received another letter from Harrison Webb. All 20 of her pieces had sold, most within the first 3 days of the exhibition. Webb had a list of clients waiting for more work, and he wanted to represent Clara exclusively. The money from the sales was more than Clara typically earned in 6 months of commissions. The success of the show changed Clara's career. Webb proved to be an excellent dealer, promoting Clara's work to wealthy clients in San Francisco and beyond. Clara began receiving commissions from people she had never met, asking for drawings of their ranches, their horses, their favorite Montana vistas. She was able to raise her prices significantly, and suddenly her art income rivaled what Cole earned from the ranch. You are going to be more successful than I am, Cole joked one evening as Clara sorted through commission requests. We are a partnership, Clara reminded him. Your success is my success and vice versa. Besides, none of this would have happened if you had not found me drawing thunder that day. Best day of my life, Cole said, coming to wrap his arms around her from behind. Well, tied with our wedding day and the days our children were born, and pretty much every day since, actually. Clara laughed and leaned back against him. Sentimental fool. You're sentimental fool, Cole corrected, kissing the top of her head. By 1889, Montana was preparing for statehood, and Silver Ridge was celebrating. There were parades and speeches, and Cole was asked to provide horses for the official ceremonies. Samuel, now 11, was old enough to help significantly with the ranch work, and Cole was teaching him everything about breeding and training. Rose, at 9, showed no interest in horses beyond drawing them, but she had inherited her mother's artistic talent in full measure. Her drawings were sophisticated beyond her years, and Clara was already planning to send Rose to an art school in the East when she was older, if Rose wanted to go. Clara was 35 now, Cole 39. They were established, respected members of the community. Cole served on the town council. Clara's art was known throughout the West. Their children were healthy and happy. The ranch was prosperous. They had built a good life together, better than either had dared to hope for that afternoon by Willow Creek 13 years ago. But Clara found herself feeling restless, wanting something she could not quite name. It was not dissatisfaction exactly, more a sense that there was something else she was meant to do, some way she had not yet fulfilled her potential. She mentioned it to Cole one night as they lay in bed, the Montana darkness complete outside their window. I think I want to write a book, she said into the darkness. What kind of book? Cole asked, his voice alert. He was always interested in Clara's ideas, always supportive of her ambitions. A book about drawing horses and cattle, Clara said slowly, working out the idea as she spoke. A manual for artists who want to draw Western subjects but do not know how. I could include technical instruction, but also information about animal anatomy and behavior. All the things I have learned from you over the years. She felt Cole shift beside her, turning toward her. That is a brilliant idea. There is nothing like that available, is there? Not that I know of. And with the West becoming more popular in art, I think there would be a market for it. How can I help? Cole asked immediately. Over the next 2 years, Clara worked on her book in whatever spare time she could find. She created hundreds of instructional drawings, wrote detailed explanations of techniques and principles, included observations about horse and cattle behavior that would help artists capture them accurately. Cole reviewed every chapter, correcting her information when needed, adding insights from his decades of experience with horses. It was exhausting work on top of Clara's commission work and her responsibilities to her family, but it was also deeply fulfilling. When she finally sent the completed manuscript to a publisher in New York in the spring of 1891, she felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had experienced before. The publisher wrote back 6 weeks later, offering Clara a contract and an advance. The Art of Drawing Western Livestock by Clara Brennan was published in January of 1892, and it became an unexpected success. Artists throughout the country bought it as a reference. Art schools began using it as a textbook. Clara received letters from readers thanking her for demystifying subjects they had struggled with. The success of the book brought Clara a level of recognition she had never anticipated. She was invited to give lectures, to teach workshops, to contribute articles to art journals. She turned down most of these opportunities, not wanting to leave her family for extended periods. But she did travel to San Francisco twice to speak at the California School of Design, and Cole and the children came with her, turning the trips into family adventures. Samuel, now 14, was becoming a skilled horseman, and Cole was already trusting him with significant responsibilities on the ranch. He had Cole's height and Clara's thoughtful nature, and he was developing into a fine young man. Rose, at 12, was producing artwork that astonished everyone who saw it. Clara made sure Rose had the best supplies and instruction available, determined that her daughter would have every opportunity to develop her talent. In 1893, Clara discovered she was pregnant again at age 39, a surprise to both her and Cole. The pregnancy was difficult, Clara's body older and less resilient than it had been with Samuel and Rose. She was confined to bed rest for the last 2 months, frustrated by her inability to work or help with the household. Cole was attentive and worried, barely leaving her side when he was not working. Their second son was born in December, a cold winter night that mirrored Samuel's birth 15 years earlier. The labor was long and frightening, and for several hours both Clara and the baby were in danger. But Mrs. Brennan, still the best midwife in Silver Ridge despite her advancing years, guided them through, and finally, a thin, wailing infant was placed in Clara's exhausted arms. They named him Henry, after Cole's father, and called him Harry. He was smaller than Samuel and Rose had been as newborns, more fragile, and Cole and Clara spent anxious weeks making sure he was eating enough, growing enough, thriving. But Harry proved to be a fighter, and by the time spring arrived, he had grown into a chubby, healthy baby with a temperament as sunny as Rose's was serious. Samuel and Rose doted on their baby brother, Samuel being surprisingly gentle with the infant, Rose drawing picture after picture of him. Clara gradually regained her strength and returned to her work, though she was more tired now, more aware of the passage of time and the limits of her energy. Cole, too, was showing signs of age. His hair was more gray than dark now, and he moved with the stiffness of old injuries and hard work. But he was still strong, still passionate about his horses, still utterly devoted to Clara and their family. They had been married 17 years, together for 18, and Clara loved him more than ever. On a warm afternoon in June, when Harry was 6 months old and sleeping soundly, Clara suggested they visit Willow Creek. Annie was watching Harry, Samuel was working with Miguel on breaking a new colt, and Rose was at a friend's house. It was a rare moment of freedom, and they took it. They rode together on Ranger, Cole's arms around Clara, moving slowly through the familiar landscape. When they reached the cottonwood tree, Cole helped Clara dismount, and they sat in their old spot, the creek burbling beside them, the shade dappling the grass. "Do you remember the first day we met here?" Clara asked, leaning against Cole's shoulder. "Of course," Cole said. "You were drawing thunder, your fingers all covered in charcoal, and you jumped about a foot in the air when I spoke to you. You asked me to draw you next, and I blushed so hard I thought I might faint." Cole laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "You did blush hard. I thought you were going to refuse. Then I thought you might hit me with your sketchbook." "I considered it," Clara admitted. "You were so confident, so sure of yourself. It was infuriating and attractive in equal measure." "And now?" Cole asked, pulling her closer. "Now I know that confidence comes from kindness," Clara said seriously, "from being secure enough in yourself to support others. You have spent 18 years helping me be the best version of myself, Cole. You have never tried to diminish my dreams or make me feel small. You have championed me at every turn." "Because you deserve it," Cole said simply. "And because your success is a gift, Clara, to you, to me, to everyone who gets to see your art. Why would I want to limit that?" They sat in comfortable silence, watching the water flow past, listening to the birds in the cottonwood branches above. Clara thought about everything that had happened since that first afternoon, all the joy and struggle and growth. She thought about the life they had built together, the family they had created, the partnership they had forged. "I would not change anything," she said quietly, "not one single thing. Even the hard parts, the losses and fears and exhaustion, I would not trade any of it." "Neither would I," Cole agreed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, worn soft with age. "Do you remember this?" Clara took it and carefully unfolded it. It was the drawing she had done of Cole that first day, the one he had looked at with such wonder. The charcoal was faded now, the paper creased from years of folding and unfolding, but the image was still clear. Cole as he had been at 26, strong and confident and just beginning to fall in love. "You kept it," Clara said, her throat tight with emotion. "I have carried it with me every day since you gave it to me," Cole said. "It reminds me of where we started, what brought us together. Your gift, your ability to see people truly and capture them on paper. That gift brought you into my life, Clara. I thank God for it every single day." Clara carefully refolded the drawing and handed it back to Cole, then turned to face him fully. She took his weathered, scarred hands in hers, these hands that had held her and their children, that had built their home and their livelihood, that had never once been raised in anger. "I love you," she said. "I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you until the end, and if there is anything beyond that, I will love you there too." Cole cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the roughness of his palms. "You are everything," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Everything good in my life started the day I found you by this creek. You are my best friend, my partner, the mother of my children, and the love of my life. There are not words for what you mean to me, Clara." He kissed her then, slow and deep, a kiss that held 18 years of love and partnership and commitment. When they finally pulled apart, both were crying, the good kind of tears that come from overwhelming happiness. They stayed by Willow Creek until the sun began to set, talking about their children, their hopes for the future, their dreams for the ranch and Clara's art. They made plans and remembered shared history, laughing over old stories and marveling at how quickly time had passed. As the light faded and they prepared to ride home, Clara took one last look at the spot where their life together had begun. The cottonwood tree was larger now, its branches spreading wider. The creek still flowed clear and cool, but everything else had changed, transformed by love and time and the choices they had made. "Ready?" Cole asked, offering his hand to help her mount. "Always," Clara said, taking his hand and swinging up into the saddle. "As long as I am with you, I am always ready." They rode home together through the gathering dusk, their ranch rising from the prairie ahead of them, lights glowing warm in the windows where their children waited. It was not the life Clara had imagined when she was a girl in Boston, dreaming of art school and gallery exhibitions. It was better. It was real and complicated and challenging, and full of more love than she had known was possible. That night, after Harry was asleep and Samuel and Rose were in their rooms, Cole and Clara sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. Cole's arm was around Clara's shoulders, her head resting on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "Thank you," Clara said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing me that day by the creek. For asking me to draw you, for choosing me." "Clara," Cole said, tightening his arm around her, "you saved me just as much as I saved you, maybe more. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working hard but not really living. You taught me to see beauty, to appreciate art, to understand that there is more to life than survival and success. You gave me love and family and purpose beyond the ranch. We saved each other then," Clara decided. "Yes," Cole agreed, "we did." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Harry grew from a baby to a toddler to a small boy with his father's sunny disposition and his mother's observant nature. Samuel, at 18, took on more and more responsibility for the ranch, working alongside Cole as a true partner. He had inherited his father's gift with horses and his mother's careful attention to detail. He began courting Emma Chen's younger sister Lily, a match that delighted both families. Rose, at 16, was creating artwork that rivaled Clara's in skill and surpassed it in imagination. She painted as well as drew, and her canvases were bold and vivid, capturing the Montana landscape in ways that made viewers see it anew. Clara had arranged for Rose to study with a renowned artist in San Francisco the following year, an opportunity that both excited and terrified Clara. Her daughter would be so far away, but she would have the training and opportunities Clara had never had. Cole and Clara aged together, their bodies bearing the marks of hard work and the passage of time, but their love as strong as ever. Cole's hair went completely white, and he developed a limp from an old horse injury that flared up in cold weather. Clara's eyes were not as sharp as they once were, and she had to wear spectacles when drawing fine details. But they still met at Willow Creek sometimes, still laughed together every day, still chose each other again and again. In 1899, at a family dinner celebrating Clara's 45th birthday, Samuel announced that he and Lily were engaged. The wedding was planned for the following spring, and Lily would move to the ranch, into the small house that Cole and Samuel had built on the north pasture. The prospect of grandchildren delighted both Cole and Clara, though Clara made Samuel promise that he and Lily would take their time, enjoy being married before starting a family. Rose left for San Francisco in the fall, and Clara cried for a week after saying goodbye at the train station. But Rose wrote long letters every week, and her excitement about her studies was evident in every word. Her teacher, a famous painter named Robert Morrison, wrote to Clara praising Rose's talent and dedication. Clara framed that letter and hung it in her studio. Harry, at 6, was a joy, bright and curious and affectionate. He loved the horses like his father and brother, but he also loved drawing like his mother and sister. Cole joked that they had created the perfect child, equally balanced between both parents' passions. In the spring of 1900, Samuel and Lily were married in a ceremony at the ranch, with Reverend Michaels officiating and half of Silver Ridge in attendance. Rose came home for the wedding, sophisticated in her city clothes, but still there Rose underneath. The celebration lasted 2 days, with dancing and feasting and happiness that seemed to seep into the very ground. Clara danced with Cole as they had at their own wedding 24 years earlier, his arms strong around her, his steps still sure despite the limp. "Look at what we made," he said, gesturing to Samuel and Lily laughing with friends, to Rose talking animatedly with an art collector who had traveled from Denver to meet her, to Harry running around with other children in the gathering darkness. "Look at what we made," Clara echoed, her heart so full she thought it might burst. The first decade of the new century brought prosperity and stability. The ranch continued to thrive under the joint management of Cole and Samuel. Clara's reputation as an artist grew, her work now commanding substantial prices and her book in its 3rd printing. Rose returned from San Francisco with honors and set up her own studio in Silver Ridge, determined to prove that an artist could thrive even in a small Montana town. Harry started school and excelled at everything he tried, a natural student with his mother's intelligence and his father's work ethic. In 1902, Lily gave birth to twin girls, Grace and Hope, making Cole and Clara grandparents for the first time. Cole was completely besotted with his granddaughters, spending hours showing them the horses, singing them songs, making them laugh with silly faces. Clara drew the babies constantly, filling sketchbook after sketchbook with images of them sleeping, playing, growing. More grandchildren followed over the next years. Rose married a fellow artist named Daniel Wright in 1904, and they had a son named Cole in 1905, an honor that made Cole Sr. cry. Lily and Samuel had a son named Henry in 1906, ensuring that the Brennan name would continue for another generation. Through it all, Cole and Clara remained the center of their growing family, the foundation on which everything else was built. They celebrated holidays at the ranch house, which had been expanded multiple times to accommodate everyone. They gave advice when asked and stayed silent when not. They supported their children's choices and delighted in their grandchildren's antics. In 1910, Montana prepared to celebrate its 21st year of statehood, and Silver Ridge organized a celebration that included a historical exhibition about the town's founding. Clara was asked to contribute drawings of what the town had looked like in the early days, and she spent weeks working from memory and old photographs to recreate the Silver Ridge of 1876. As part of the exhibition, Clara was interviewed by a reporter from the Montana Historical Society, a young woman named Alice Thornton who wanted to document the stories of women who had helped settle the West. Alice asked Clara about her journey from Boston, her art career, her marriage to Cole. "What would you say was the turning point in your life?" Alice asked, her pencil poised over her notebook. "The moment when everything changed," Clara thought for a long moment, then smiled. "It was an afternoon in June of 1876. I was sitting by Willow Creek, drawing a beautiful sorrel mare when a cowboy appeared and asked me to draw him next. I blushed so hard I thought I might die of embarrassment." "That was how you met your husband?" Alice asked, charmed. "That was how I met my whole life," Clara corrected gently. "Everything good, everything I am now, started that afternoon. Cole saw me, really saw me, in a way no one ever had before. He believed in my art before anyone else did. He loved me not despite my ambitions, but because of them. He gave me a home and a family and a partnership that has been the bedrock of my existence." "That is beautiful," Alice said, writing quickly. "And what advice would you give to young women today who have dreams and ambitions?" Clara looked out the window of her studio, seeing Cole in the paddock working with Harry, now 16 and already taller than his father, teaching him some fine point of horse training. She thought about Samuel with his family, about Rose and her thriving art career, about the life she and Cole had built together over 34 years. "Find someone who sees your dreams as necessary, not negotiable," she said finally. "Find someone who champions your gifts and never asks you to make yourself smaller to make them feel bigger. And when you find that person, hold on to them with everything you have. Build a life together based on mutual respect and support and love. That is the foundation of everything good." Alice finished writing and looked up, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Your husband is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Clara said firmly. "Cole gave me a life beyond anything I imagined possible. He gave me himself, completely and without reservation. That is the greatest gift I have ever received." The interview was published in several newspapers throughout Montana, and Clara received dozens of letters from women thanking her for her words, for being an example of what was possible. Clara answered each letter personally, encouraging these women to pursue their dreams and to never settle for less than they deserved. In 1914, as the world beyond Montana descended into war, the Brennan family remained focused on their own small corner of peace. Cole was 64 now, officially retired from the day-to-day running of the ranch, though still consulted on every major decision. His hands shook slightly from years of hard work, and he napped every afternoon, but his mind was sharp and his love for Clara as fierce as ever. Clara was 60, her dark hair now white, her face lined with years of laughter and sun and life. She still drew every day, still took commissions though more selectively now, still taught drawing to anyone who asked. Her latest project was a series of portraits of Montana pioneers, documenting the people who had built the state from wilderness. They had 8 grandchildren now, ranging from the twins who were 12 to Daniel, and Rose's daughter May, who was just 2 years old. The ranch house rang with young voices during holidays and summer visits, chaos and noise and love filling every corner. On a warm afternoon in June of 1916, exactly 40 years after the day they met, Cole suggested they visit Willow Creek. Harry was managing the ranch now, having taken over from Samuel, who had started his own smaller operation on the North Pasture. The grandchildren were all elsewhere, and Cole and Clara had the afternoon to themselves. They walked this time, neither of them quite trusting their balance on horseback anymore. It took twice as long as it once had, Cole's limp more pronounced, Clara stopping to catch her breath. But eventually they reached the cottonwood tree, now massive and ancient-looking, its branches spreading wide over the creek bank. Clara spread a blanket Cole had carried and they settled onto it carefully, their joints protesting. But once they were seated, looking out over the familiar view, Clara felt the years fall away. This place was unchanged, eternal, a touchstone connecting their present to their past. 40 years, Cole said wonderingly. It feels like yesterday and like forever, both at the same time. I know what you mean, Clara said, taking his hand. Their fingers interlaced naturally, automatically, the gesture as familiar as breathing after 4 decades of marriage. Do you remember what you said that first day? Cole asked. When I asked you to draw me, Clara laughed. I said it would not be appropriate, and you said I was afraid of the challenge. You always knew exactly how to get under my skin. I wanted to spend more time with you, Cole admitted. You were the most fascinating person I had ever met, and I was terrified you would disappear before I could figure out how to make you stay. I was terrified too, Clara confessed. Terrified of how much I wanted to stay, how much you made me feel after just one conversation. I had convinced myself I did not need anyone, that my art was enough. Then you showed up and proved me wrong. Cole raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Best mistake you ever made. Best decision, Clara corrected. It might have been fast, but it was right. We were right. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable and companionable, watching the water flow past just as it had 40 years ago, just as it would 40 years hence. Clara thought about all the moments that had led them here, all the choices and chances and challenges they had navigated together. "I want you to know something," Clara said finally. "I want you to know that every day with you has been a gift. Every single day, even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones because we face them together. You are the best man I have ever known, Cole Brennan, and loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." Cole's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Clara," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "you are my heart. You have been my heart since the moment you blushed when I asked you to draw me. I have spent 40 years trying to deserve you, trying to be worthy of the love you have given me so freely. I do not know if I have succeeded, but I want you to know I have tried with everything I have." "You have more than succeeded," Clara said firmly. "You have been exactly who I needed exactly when I needed you. You have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams. Children, grandchildren, a career, respect, love, so much love, Cole. More love than I knew existed in the world." They held each other then, two people who had aged together, grown together, built a life together from nothing but love and determination and mutual respect. They held each other as the sun moved across the sky, as the shadows lengthened, as the air began to cool with the approach of evening. "We should head back," Cole said eventually, reluctantly. "Harry will worry if we are gone too long." "Just a few more minutes," Clara said, not ready to leave this place this moment. "Let us stay a little longer." So they stayed, watching the creek flow past, listening to the birds in the cottonwood, feeling the warmth of the setting sun on their faces. And Clara felt a peace settle over her, deep and complete. She had lived a good life. She had loved and been loved in return. She had created art and family and a legacy that would outlast her. She had found her place in the world and made it her own. When they finally stood, helping each other up with shaky but determined movements, Clara took one last look at the cottonwood tree, at the creek, at the exact spot where she had been sitting 40 years ago when Cole had walked into her life. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was speaking to Cole, to the land, to fate itself. "Thank you for all of it." Cole heard her and understood as he always understood. He took her hand and squeezed it gently. "Thank you," he echoed, "for saying yes. For taking a chance on a cowboy you barely knew, for building this life with me." They walked home together slowly, hand in hand, the Montana sun painting the sky in shades of gold and rose behind them. When they reached the ranch house, their children and grandchildren were waiting, dinner ready, the table set, laughter and love filling the air. And Clara looked at Cole across the crowded room, across 40 years of shared life, and smiled. He smiled back, and in that moment, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she would do it all again. Every choice, every challenge, every moment of doubt or fear or exhaustion, she would do it all again for this, for him. For the life they had created together from a chance meeting by a creek and a simple request to be drawn. In the years that followed, Cole and Clara continued to be the anchor of their growing family. They lived to see Harry married to a teacher from Silver Ridge named Sarah, to welcome more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, christenings and graduations. They watched Montana change around them, the wilderness giving way to settlements, the frontier becoming history. Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1923, at the age of 73, with Clara holding his hand. He had lived a full life, had accomplished everything he set out to do, and had been loved deeply until his last breath. The funeral brought people from across Montana, all the lives he had touched, all the people who respected him. Clara mourned deeply, but without bitterness. She had been given 47 years with the man she loved, and she knew how rare and precious that was. She continued to draw, to spend time with her family, to tell stories about Cole to the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who clamored to hear them. On the first anniversary of Cole's death, Clara returned to Willow Creek one last time. She brought her sketchbook and charcoal, sitting under the cottonwood tree where it had all begun. And there, with hands that shook with age but were still sure with purpose, she drew. She drew the creek and the tree and the mountains beyond. She drew thunder, long gone but never forgotten. And finally, she drew Cole as she had that first day, young and strong and full of life, looking at her with those storm-cloud eyes that had seen her, truly seen her, and chosen to love what they found. When the drawing was complete, Clara studied it for a long moment, then carefully tore it from her sketchbook. She folded it gently, just as Cole had folded her first drawing of him all those years ago. And she pressed it to her heart, feeling the familiar ache of loss mixed with the equally powerful warmth of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered one more time, "for everything. For giving me a life beyond anything I dared to dream. For loving me so completely. For being exactly who you were. I will love you always, Cole Brennan, until we meet again." Clara lived 5 more years, productive and surrounded by family until the end. When she passed in 1928 at the age of 74, her children found dozens of sketchbooks in her studio, a complete visual record of her life in Montana. They found the drawings she had done of Cole over the years, hundreds of them, each one capturing a different moment, a different expression, a different angle of the man she had loved. And they found, carefully preserved in a frame on her desk, the very first drawing she had ever made of him, faded and creased but treasured, a reminder of where their love story had begun. Clara and Cole were buried side by side in the cemetery overlooking Silver Ridge, their graves marked with simple headstones. But their real legacy was not in stone but in the family they had created, the love they had shared, the lives they had touched. Their great-great-grandchildren would grow up hearing the story of how a cowboy found an artist sketching his horse by a creek, how he asked her to draw him next, how she blushed so hard she thought she might die. They would hear about the love that grew from that moment, a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, a love that proved that sometimes the best things in life come from taking chances, from saying yes when every practical instinct says no, from trusting in the connection between two souls who recognize each other across time and space and circumstance. And they would understand, as Clara had understood that first day, that love, real love, the kind that changes everything, is worth any risk, any sacrifice, any leap of faith. Because in the end, love is what remains. Love is what matters. Love is what makes a life worth living.